We believe that God abrogates, okay, and that obviously the prophets are the mediums for that. But what we were talking in particular about, if you remember, I gave 2 or 3 examples.
You brought up Ezekiel.
Okay, tell us the examples exactly.
Right, with the offerings where there are apparent contradictions between the exact specifications of the Sabbath and new moon additional offerings between the Book of Numbers and the Book of Ezekiel. And I gave some answers from the Talmud. You didn't accept them, and then you moved on to another topic.
Do you remember the authorities I cited from my end?
You cited
from the Talmud.
Authorities that you cited from the Talmud. You cited the 13 principles from Rabbi Ishmael. Yes. What do you mean?
Okay, there's a few things that we spoke about. Not just Ezekiel, first of all. On this point, we also mentioned Abraham. And in the first,
yes, of course, you're right.
Yes.
So you brought up Abraham with Isaac, and you brought up Ibn Ezra.
Yes.
And
what did I say about it? What did Ibn Ezra say? First of all, sorry, who is Ibn Ezra?
Ibn Ezra was a rabbi who lived in the 13th century in Spain, and he was one of the great commentaries.
Would you say he's authoritative?
Yeah, he is one of the authorities.
Yes.
And you brought up a quote from Ibn Ezra, which I looked up, and I didn't really see what you were getting at with the quote.
What was the quote saying?
I forget, but you wanted to say it had a proof of abrogation. I forget what it said.
Okay, so maybe that's something we should recap.
Yeah.
If you forget it. Yeah. Okay.
So that was the Abraham and Isaac thing, the binding. We spoke about the Ezekiel stuff.
Yeah.
And after all of that, you, unless I'm forgetting anything, you moved on to speak about Isaiah 42.
Right. Yeah. Exactly correct. I think you've got the timeline largely in place.
Yes.
There's a few things I think we need to kind of establish. We said that in order for a prophet to be a prophet, or that there's a new prophet coming after Moses, or we believe Jesus as well, obviously you don't. But if there's a new prophet, he has to fulfill certain biblical criterion.
Yes.
And we said that for one, he has to preach in one God, worthy of worship, right?
Indeed.
And that's something you agree, you admit that is something which the Prophet Muhammad did do. He spoke about one God worthy of worship. There's no controversy there.
There is a slight controversy,
yes.
but not a large one, which is the issue as to whether or not Muhammad preached divine simplicity or not. Right?
Right. Well, no.
Of course, you as did you say you're an Athari? Did you say?
Well, yeah, largely, yeah.
As an Athari, of course, you do not believe in divine simplicity.
Well, no. I mean, here's the thing. Within Judaism and Christianity, these things are not even believed in. There's no unanimity or consensus there anyway. So
in Judaism, yes, there is.
I don't think there is.
There aren't any rabbis that I've ever heard of.
All right. Well, let me ask you.
That have not held of divine simplicity.
Well. Depends on how you define divine simplicity. Let me ask you a question. Do you believe God is merciful?
Depends. Like, what do you mean by merciful?
Is God powerful?
Again, it depends what you mean by God is something, right?
Okay.
When we say that God is something, are we saying that God possesses an attribute?
Yes.
Or are we simply describing God? Right.
Both of them. What you've just said here are the same thing.
No. There's two things. There's either he possesses attributes, right, that are distinct from him, i.e. from his essence, or.
No, but now you've put a spanner in the woodworks, because now you're asking whether the distinction between the essence and the attribute. But that's not my question to you.
Okay, fine.
My question to you simply is it intelligible to you? Is it befitting for me to describe God as all powerful? Yes or no?
It is befitting, yes.
Yeah, okay. And so is this an intelligible meaning? Is God's power differentiated from his knowledge?
No.
So, okay, that means to say, in your understanding, that when I say God is all knowledgeable, proposition 1, and I say God is all powerful, proposition 2, that both of those propositions are the same.
Sort of, and I'll explain why.
Okay.
I'll explain why.
Yeah.
Because the first word of each of those statements, God, in Jewish terms, means both of those things, right? God is in essence all-powerful and is in essence all-knowledgeable.
What does that mean?
That means that there is no distinction between...
No. When you say... Sorry, I don't think you understand my question. When you say God is all-powerful, what do we mean by God is all powerful? What are we trying to communicate here?
It means that he has no limits into what he can do.
Okay, and when we say he's all knowledgeable, what does that mean?
It means he has no limits in what he knows.
Okay, so these two things are different, right?
On a human level, yes.
Okay, good. So that's now you've just denied that reading of divine simplicity, which indicates that different attributes are all the same. We actually, by the way, just so this is something similar to what we have a group in Mu'tazila
Yes,
group.
we agree with them.
Fine. Nevertheless, whether you agree with them or not, you've still not been able to solve this issue, which is that when we communicate in human language, and we say that look, God is all powerful, that means he has no limits to what he can do. Okay, obviously except for the impossible things and stuff like that, which we've spoke about before. And when we say he's all knowledgeable, that means he's got no limits to his knowledge, meaning that there's no ignorance of God, there's no ignorance attribute to God. Now, in those two things, in human language that I'm speaking to you in now, are intelligible to us as distinct features of God's or attributes of God. So, would you agree with that or not?
Not necessarily, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because knowledge in itself is a power. I'm sure you would agree.
No, we're talking about two different things here.
Yeah, because when we say that God is all-powerful, he is limitless, right? Part of the fact that he is limitless, there is nothing he cannot do.
No, but
is that he cannot not know.
But what you're showing an overlap in two attributes is not you showing that these two things are the same. You're showing an aspect of overlap. You're not showing that they are two distinct things in all cases. For example, is God alive?
Is God alive?
Yes. Does God have life?
Have life? That's
yes.
What does that mean besides just being sounds?
Put life to the side.
Besides just being sounds, what does that mean?
Okay, let me ask you a question. Can God hear?
Again, but besides just being sounds, what do you mean?
Besides being sounds.
Yes.
No, we're not talking about besides sounds. Because hearing is.
I mentioned this in part 2 because you brought up, what do you think about the Christians and the Trinity? And I said, well, you said, can God be a man? I said, well, it's just sounds. It doesn't mean anything. The same applies here. When you say, can God do this? Can God do that? It's actually got to make sense.
No. I didn't say, can God do this or can God do that? I said, is God. Oh yeah, I said, can God hear?
Yes.
All right, so is God hearing? Is God all hearing?
Is God all hearing?
Yeah. Okay.
Is there anything that God cannot hear?
Okay, no. Yeah. No, good, great, good. Now we're talking, yeah? Now we're talking, Josh. Let me ask you another question. When the Bible says, Shema Israel, Adonai Elohinu Adonai Echad, yeah? When it says that God is Echad,
yes.
What does that mean?
It means that there is no plurality.
All right, so there's no plurality, there's God one.
Yes.
So one of the attributes of God is oneness, correct?
No, it's not an attribute.
Oh, so what is it then?
It's his very essence.
Okay, no. But we're describing his essence now, if you want to call it that, for the sake of argument. Can God be described as being one or not?
Of course.
Of course. Okay, so God is not two.
God is not two. That's what we mean when we say God is one.
So if God
there is no plurality.
No problem.
Within
So
God.
if God is one, is the way that we describe God with oneness the same or different to the way we describe God as being all-knowing?
Repeat the question.
Is the way in which we describe God as being one the same or different to the way in which we describe God as being all knowledgeable? Is it the same? Are we talking about the same thing, or are we talking about different things?
We are in fact talking about the same thing. And the reason is because the idea of oneness of God, i.e. the lack of plurality to God, is intrinsically the same as his limitless. And if right, there are no limits to God.
So you're saying God is speaking in tautology in the Bible?
No, God is speaking in human terms in the Bible.
No, you listen to what I'm saying. You're saying God is speaking when God says that he is one, echad,
yes.
Or when he says that he is all, or that he knows all, or that when he sees all, or that all of these things.
The third one, there isn't actually a verse.
Okay, fine. That he knows all, or that he's all powerful.
There isn't that also is not said.
So God is not described with power in the Bible, in the Old Testament.
He's not described with all power. He's described with power.
Okay, great, no problem. Now we're playing semantics. You agree that God is all powerful, meaning there's no more powerful than God, right?
I agree with you.
Okay, no problem. So when God is described with power in the Bible, Is that the same or different? You said the same as the oneness. Now what I'm saying is, if that's the case, then God is speaking in tautology. It's meaning that he's saying the same thing twice in different language. Which means that there is a superfluous addition to the way in which God is describing himself. Number one. Number two is, you actually admitted in this discussion that when we say God is all knowledgeable, versus, which means that there's no limits to his knowledge, versus God is all powerful, which means that there's no limit to his power, let's say, except for that which is impossibly understood, like can God create rocks so heavy conundrum, which is nonsense, we would say. That those two things, okay, those two things are different. You did say that.
I did say that. I'd like to retract that.
You want to retract that?
Because I now see that that's actually not actually true.
Okay.
Because as I said after that,
yes,
the knowledge is a power.
I'll allow you to retract that, but I want you to think about and ponder over why it is that you accepted that in the first place. Now, do you know why you accepted it in the first place? Let me speculate, Josh. Let me speculate, Josh, and tell me what you think.
This one,
No, let me speculate, Josh.
Speculate, Mohammed.
I think the reason why you decided to say that there is a difference in our intelligible understanding of the proposition that God is knowledgeable, or that there are no limits to his knowledge. God is power, there are no limits to his power, because they are describing two different things. Now you're saying, actually, I want to retract that statement, and I want to say that there are limits. The reason why you're doing that is not because of the logical argument presented in front of you. It is simply because you are trying to squeeze divine simplicity. You are trying to squeeze this idea that there are no actual attributes of God into the biblical discourse. There is nothing in the Bible, and I'll challenge you, in fact. Let me challenge you right now, Josh. There is nothing in the words of Moses or in the words of any of the prophets in the Hebrew Bible, all 22 books in which 24. You believe, 24, in which you believe, that says that what you're saying now. There is not one verse that says in the way in which we should understand the attributes of God should be anything other than a prima facie understanding. There's nothing at all. You are inventing that. No. That's something. Yes, you are. It means yeah, it means like apparent. That when God says that he's like Ahad, yeah, we take that on face value. We don't try and manipulate that. So anyway, that's the first thing. Second, sorry. Now let's get to the point, because we could talk about this all day. You can respond. You can respond. Yeah.
You may be slightly correct in your assumption that on a prima facie reading of the Tanakh, that one does not necessarily come to the conclusion of divine simplicity. You may be slightly correct on that. But the problem is, there is no such thing as a prima facie reading of the Tanakh, because a prima facie reading of the Tanakh on its without anything else is something you cannot read. There are no vowels. There is no meaning. No. It necessitates an oral law. You've misunderstood. An oral Torah, and in the oral Torah we have descriptions of divine simplicity. Right? Yeah. The Rambam brings this down, right? And he's not the only one. The Chovas Albo brings this down. It's very clear from Rabbi, right? Brought down in the Torah Shabbat Peh, that this is an essential principle of belief in God.
Okay, no problem. I'll just ask you one question, and then we'll move on to the next bit, because I'll remind you of something. I said to you, I'm going to find you something in the Talmud to explain to you that the authors of the Talmud, in fact, said that when the final prophet comes, that when he does come, he's going to come having the ability, or through God, to abrogate the law. I have found this in the Torah.
Okay.
In the Talmud, sorry.
Let's see.
I have found it, but before I present it to you, because you said to me last time, from what I remember, that if I find you this evidence, that you will accept the evidence, and by implication, this means that you will accept the only one thing that was stopping you from recognizing the Prophet Muhammad as a final prophet was indeed this part, which is that he cannot abrogate the law, and that the law should not be abrogated. So, on your understanding, if I'm able to provide you evidence from the Talmud, which says exactly what I've just said to you, you should accept my argument as at least one reading which is legitimate within the scope of Jewish law. Number one.
If you bring me evidence.
Yes, I will.
If you bring me evidence.
Yes.
Which is indisputable.
Yes.
Which is the way that we have classically understood this piece of Talmud.
Yes.
And fine. Then
you accept it.
Evidence.
Okay, remember that. Now, before I go and proceed and present, this evidence. I want to first challenge you one more time, last time, final time, on the issue of divine simplicity.
Yes.
My question to you is just one question, which is that how is it conceivable, intelligible on a rational level, that something which is referred to in a certain language, let's say it's intelligence or knowledge, the knowledge of God, is the same as something which is understood in a completely different way? I want you to explain to me if, and you did accept this conditional, knowledge is described, or all knowledge is described as the lack of ignorance, and that power is described here is the lack of limitation. That how are you making these two things, which are clearly definitionally different from one another, one thing? How is it conceivable that these two things, which are definitionally understood differently, can be seen as the same thing?
Because one actually subsumes the other. This is what I was trying to get at before, right? The limitlessness, the all-powerfulness, subsumes the lack of ignorance and the all knowledge. Right?
But what you've just
one subsumes the other. So all knowledge is simply subsumed into the category of all power.
All right. So
lack of ignorance is subsumed by limitlessness.
Okay. Let me come back to you. In fact, what you've just said there is incriminating.
Why?
Is intellectually incriminating.
Why?
The reason why what you've just said there is nothing but intellectually incriminating is because to say something X is subsumed by Y is to indicate the differentiation between X and Y. Meaning, if I say the mother or the baby is contained within the mother's stomach, that is to distinguish between the baby and the mother. You cannot say something is subsumed by something else unless something else exists in the first place. So that's done. That's actually no, that's done, Josh.
No,
it is. It's an entailment.
Not true.
Yes, it is.
Not true. No.
Unless it's tautological. The only other way is that it's tautological. And if it's tautological, that means we're describing the same thing. Do you know what a tautology is?
Yes, a tautology is where you say one thing and then you basically say it again, but in slightly different language.
Okay.
In a way that
yes,
you're simply repeating yourself.
So if you say that God's knowledge is the same as God's power, and you're saying they're the same thing, they're the different language, there's only one option for you if you're saying that they're not different, which is that they are tautological. That when God speaks about knowledge, he is speaking about power, and when he is speaking about power, he's speaking about knowledge, which of course would corrupt the meaning, corrupt not only the prima facie meaning, but any type of reading of the Hebrew Bible. Because if you understand it that way, that means when God's speaking about things which are applied to knowledge, and then he references his knowledge, that he's actually referencing his power, and vice versa. And so there is not even one master key category or one master key attribute which everything must be so-called subsumed by. Because then one could argue, what about the will of God? The will of God, is the will of God different, or is it differentiated, or is it similar, or is it different to the power of God? Because the will, and I think we agreed on this beforehand, will is the choice to do A over B or B over A. That's what will is. Having choice and will means that you have an ability to choose A over B.
You have the power to choose A over B.
No problem.
Yes.
But if I say that he has the ability to choose A over B, that's referencing a different state of affairs to just saying that you have power. It's conceivable, therefore, to have power without will.
No,
but it's not.
You can't be all-powerful and yet have power which is lacking.
No, I didn't say all-powerful. If you listen to what I just said, I said it's conceivable for something to have power but not will. Like, I'll give you an example. This mobile phone right now, this mobile phone has power, would you agree? Everything I think you would agree.
Yes.
All right, so if this mobile phone has power, it has no will, it's not volitional, it cannot choose A over B, unless, of course, I decide for it. So in other words, it has no decision-making ability. However, it has power. So it's conceivable that something can have power but no will. But it's not conceivable that something can have will but no ability. Unless, of course, we're talking about something which is not in the realms of that which is conceivable. Yeah.
Will and no ability. So someone in a comatose state.
Say again?
Someone in a vegetative.
Yeah, vegetative. Yeah.
Locked-in syndrome. Sorry.
Yeah.
They might have their will, but they have no ability to.
Yeah. So in the vegetative state, they have no will at that point when they're in that state.
No, but when there are the conditions where a person.
Yeah, they have no will at that point.
No, they do have will. They have no way of. They can sometimes move their toes, and that's it.
Okay, yeah.
They don't have any power.
If they can move it, then they've chosen to move it, which means they're not fully vegetated. Yeah.
You have the will to do something and make that choice. In that choice.
But do you understand what I'm saying right
I
now?
understand what you're saying. 2 points to counter to the things that you said.
Yeah.
Number one, you said
Awesome,
that.
that's
In fact, I'll go in reverse order. The second thing that you said just now was that the ability to choose is not the same. Sorry, you said it's conceivable that one can have power without will, like the mobile phone, right? However, that's not what we're talking about when we talk about God. We're talking about all powerful. We're talking about limitlessness, which means that there is all power, which includes the power of choice, the power of will, right? And back to the previous thing which you said, which was you raised an objection about tautology, and you said, well, then we'll have superfluous words in the Bible. Well, that's also not true, because we have a dictum in Judaism called Torah Dibra B'Lashon Bnei Adam. The Torah speaks in the language of people. In order to people to understand what exactly we mean when we say God is limitless, we then need to give certain descriptions in order to understand what He is not.
Okay.
Right? We needed to understand that there is no plurality, and therefore it uses the word echad, one. We needed to understand that there is that there is nothing beyond His knowledge, and therefore we had to use phrases like Hashem Yodea Kol Machshavas Libo, stuff like that. Hashem knows all the thoughts of the man's heart. Right? It's teaching us lessons.
I appreciate what you're saying, Josh. However, having said that, you have provided no defense for your position.
Yes, I have.
And no problem. You have tried to defend yourself. Let's let the people at home decide whether or not it's satisfying or whether they're convinced. That's no problem.
And of course, you're saying that because you have no effective way of defending against that.
The burden of proof is upon the one that's making the claim.
You're also making a claim.
My claim is that when you're definitionally saying that something is not ignorant, and that's what knowledge is, or it's all knowledge is that you're not ignorant, and something has no limits, and that's what power is. Something has the choice to do A over B, that's what choice is. You're effectively talking about three different state of affairs. Do we say that God can make a choice A over B? Yes or no? Okay. Do we say that God does not have ignorance?
Correct.
Okay. So God knows things, yes?
Correct.
Okay. Are we saying that God also is powerful in the sense that He has no limitations to His power from the things which are possible?
Of course.
Okay. Now,
are those first two things powers?
No, what I'm saying is my sentence A, B, and C, did I say the same thing or did I say different things?
A and B were different things.
Okay, great.
That are included within C.
No problem. Included within it doesn't mean it means, by the way, it's distinct from it. But if you're saying, fine, no problem. Sentence B and C you said were different. No, was my sentence B and C?
Sorry, A and B. A was will, choice.
Okay.
B you said was knowledge. C
you said was power. Are they same or different?
A and B are separate things within C.
How we defined A and B, you said is separate to C, right?
Correct.
All right. So in other words, if I were to...
A and B are not separate to C. A and B are separate from each other, but
great.
within C.
No problem. A and B are separate from each other. You heard it here first. No, you said it, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, so that means to say that when I describe God's power, I described it in different terms to the way that I described His choice, correct?
No, you...
Will.
No, when you described His knowledge, you described it in different terms than His choice.
The will, no problem. Fine. So God's knowledge is different to God's will.
Yes.
Excellent. That's all I want you to say. You've just destroyed your own premise of divine...
I have not.
Yes, you have.
I have not. And the reason I have not is because I have said that those two things, which from a human understanding are separate things, because they are both examples of power. These are both descriptions of power.
No problem. But they're separate.
And God is
they're separate
limitless.
articulations of how we describe the functionality of God, if you want to put it in that language. If there's two separate things, we are describing God using adjectives with different words. And these words have different meanings. You've just said yourself, B is different to C. So they are not tautological, which means that they're not describing the same thing. And if they're not tautological, you cannot say everything is this, God has one attribute, or there's no attributes of God, that no attributes of God exist. That's impossible. It's a contradiction. You have to understand it's a contradiction. You can't say God's power You can't say God's knowledge is X, God's choice is Y, yet God's knowledge and God's power are choice are the same. That's a logical contradiction. Impossible. Impossible. Impossible.
Aspect. If the Torah was worded in a way that there was no apparent tautology, would it be understandable by the people to whom God has given it? So we said the Torah says that God has knowledge, power, and
yes,
so on.
yes.
And surely it seems to me that in order for Moses to convince the Jewish people that what they have is a coherent document that makes sense, it feels the need to explain features of God. It can't explain God's essence. It can't say what He is, but it can say that He's what He's not. Maybe.
But what you're describing is what is referred to in systematic theology as negative attributes. So, for example, if I were to use the example of pre-eternality or post-eternality, I say God is not X. He doesn't have a beginning. God does not have a beginning, therefore He's pre-eternal. God does not have an end, therefore He's post-eternal. All right, so that's a separate kettle of fish, if you like, a separate line of inquiry of describing God in positive terms. And when you're talking about God in choice, or the choice of God, or the knowledge of God, we're not describing God in negative terms. We're describing Him in positive terms. And so, from that perspective, it's actually disanalogous. But let me just get, because let's get straight to the point, right? Already we've talked about divine simplicity. You said already that the Mu'tazilis agree with this. It's a group of Islamists pretty much extinct now. No problem. You agree with the Mu'tazilis. But so far you haven't. No problem.
Yeah.
Say you agree with the Mu'tazilis.
Yeah.
So far, no problem. Become Muslim. I'm not going to say become Mu'tazili. I'm not going to say that. But I mean.
Well, you're being disingenuous.
No. I don't believe in what you said.
Exactly.
I've just refuted it. Anyway, look. Having said that, now the second part of this discussion, where I think more pertinent here, because you would agree with me, wouldn't you, Josh?
Yes.
That if God told us clearly in the Torah that this is how to describe me.
Yes.
That these ways in which I'm suggesting to you, for example, through these attributes, would be something you would accept. If Moses said to you, God is all knowledgeable, that's different to the fact that He's all powerful. Would you accept it if Moses came to you and said that?
If Moses came and said to me that He's
the knowledge of God,
knowledge is separate from power.
Not fully separate, but in the sense that they are two different adjectives. Yes.
That they are two different adjectives in language?
Yes.
Or they are distinct from each other.
These are two separate attributes. God has attributes, and He has an attribute of knowledge, and He has the attribute of power. Would you accept?
Moses said it to me.
Yeah. Would you accept it?
Not sure. Maybe.
Okay. This is disbelief. What you just said there. And you're a heretic. No, honestly, if Moses himself, if is disbelief of Judaism to say that. If Moses said to you X or Y, and he's Moses.
If
You believe
Wednesday is
Thursday? If Moses is speaking, there's different between Moses speaking on his own behalf and Moses speaking as a...
No, he's saying it's from God. Let's say he's saying it's from God. I'm saying he's saying it's from God. What you would reject?
That's like saying, well, if Moses comes to you and says that Wednesday is Thursday, should you believe him? It's nonsense, because Moses would not say something.
No, but what you've said is the equivalent of Wednesday equals Thursday.
No, that's exactly what you've said.
No,
you're saying if Moses comes,
let people
which is
decide.
contradictory to what he said before. Well, then should we listen to him now?
Okay, see, this is the disbelieving way which the Quran actually attacks about Jewish clergy. Actually, to be honest with you. فَلِمَ تَقْتُلُونَ أَنْبِيَاءَ اللَّهِ Why'd you kill the prophets of God? Why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? You still have the same remnants of the old clergy, Jewish clergy, who disbelieving notions. Anyway, now let's see how sincere you are. Honestly, the Quran says
they mean nothing to us.
It doesn't matter.
They mean nothing to us.
They will on the day of judgment. Let's see. No, honestly, they will. What Rabbi Joseph Albo? You know him?
Yeah, the Sefer Ikrim.
You know him?
The Sefer Ikrim.
Okay, listen to what Rabbi Joseph Albo.
Are you going to read it in context or out of context? Because I've heard it.
Look, please.
Yeah?
Please.
Okay, fine.
Please.
Fine.
If you think that something I'm going to read is out of context, it's upon you to provide how I've decontextualized or otherwise distorted the notion. But let me finish.
With the pre-agreement before you read it, that I'm not a walking encyclopedia.
No problem.
And I do not have a smartphone.
Well,
after you've read it, are we able to go on Safaria and look at the context itself?
Absolutely, we can do it whatever you like.
Great.
Well, on his phone, on my phone, on anybody's phone. So he said to us, ladies and gentlemen, before, that if you find me something in the Talmud that indicates to the fact that a prophet can come after Moses and that he will be given the right to abrogate the law, that he will accept it. Now I'm going to read something to you from his authority. Joseph Albo wrote, accordingly, if his mission is proved in the same manner as was that of Moses, he's talking about the prophet, the new prophet that come after Moses. Listen carefully. It is proper to listen to the second prophet, even if he desires to abolish the precepts of the first. Abolish. And it's mentioned in Safar, Harakrim, volume 3, chapter 19, verse number 6.
So
Please respond.
Let's look in the context. Now, two things. Number one, we need to look at the context.
Yeah, we will, yeah.
Right?
And when we do, and if it turns out what I say is true, will you be willing now to accept the truth of Islam?
Sure, because I know the context. I know the context, and I know you've taken it out of context.
Okay.
I know you've taken it out of context.
See, look.
I've read this before. I know you've taken it out of context.
Okay.
Right? I know you have.
This video, it goes all around
I know.
the world.
I know, mate.
And long live scientists and this.
Right. Number two, you're mistaken that
what's the
Sefer
thing again?
is not
Sorry,
the
what's
Talmud.
the
But
thing
regardless, so look on Sefaria, Sefaria.
Yeah, that's it. .com, innit? Is it .com?
I don't know if it's .com. Just Sefaria and.
Oh, Safaria. That's right, yeah.
Right, got a plethora of Jewish texts on it.
That's the name. It's a. By the way, it's not working. I don't know. Is this it?
Just type in Sefaria.
Yeah, okay.
That it's .org. There you go.
Okay.
Right.
Oh, it's .org, yeah.
Yeah. It's got all the Jewish texts.
A Safaria comes from
the word Sefer, which
Sefer means the scrolls,
book.
right? Yeah.
Sefer means a book. So if we click on
Scrolls book, same thing, brother, man. Don't be too don't be too harsh on me, huh? The scrolls.
I will be very harsh because you're taking Sefer Ikim out of context, and I don't appreciate it.
Okay, well, let's take a look at it, brother.
Okay, so
because maybe it's you that wants to take it out of context.
Right. So it was it volume 3? Did you say?
Let me take a look.
Okay. Have a look.
Volume 3, yes, chapter 19, verse 6.
Okay.
Of course.
Right. So volume 3 is minor 3. Chapter
19. Verse 6.
Yeah, I'm sure, John. Okay, number 6. Paragraph 6. There's no verses, it's paragraphs, but that's fine. Okay, so let's read this. Hold on. It's actually got English here. The manner in which one can have this latest
just read that.
having absolute verification of the general character of the second divine messenger. This proof cannot consist.
No, sorry, you're not reading it properly.
Okay.
Just read it.
The manner in which one can have this later certainty is by having an absolute verification of the genuine character of the second divine messenger. This proof cannot consist in the performance of miracles, since we see many other persons who are not prophets performing miracles, either by creating an illusion or by magic, like the Egyptian magicians, or through some other art. Moreover, we find that those prophets who are not sent to announce a law also perform miracles, hence we cannot tell whether the miracle performed by the person in question shows that he has been sent to promulgate a law, or whether it merely indicates that he is a prophet. It is clear, therefore, that a miracle is no proof that the messenger is genuine, as was explained in the 18th chapter of the first book, but the proof must be derived from the law of Moses for the reason given in the 11th chapter of the first book. Accordingly, if his mission is proved in the same manner as was that of Moses, it is proven to listen to the second prophet, even if it desires to abolish the precepts of the first. This is the reason why the Israelites believed the word of Moses, even though some of his precepts were opposed to the Noachian law, as we said before, but which they knew by tradition as divine. But they were absolutely convinced that God desired to promulgate a law through Moses, else they would not have had the right to budge from their tradition, from the law which came down to them by an unbroken tradition from their ancestors, going back ultimately to Adam and Noah.
So
this conviction was reached in two ways.
Yes.
They felt certain that the last prophet who was introducing changes was greater than the first, and they verified the genuineness of the last prophet's mission as firmly as that of the first. Both these kinds of proof applied absolutely in Moses' case.
Yes.
He was a greater prophet than those who lived before him.
Yes.
He performed wonderful miracles such as had never been performed before.
Yes.
The Bible makes this clear when it says, "And I appeared unto Abraham and to Isaac and unto Jacob as God Almighty, but my name, God, I made me not known to them." The meaning is that God revealed himself to Moses with his great name, by means of which he was able to perform miracles openly and publicly, changing the laws of nature, such as had never been done for the earlier prophets, who could only perform invisible miracles to deliver them death in time of famine and from the sword in time of war. The mission of Moses was verified because all Israel heard the voice speaking to Moses, as the Bible says, that the people may hear when I speak with thee. For I desire to promulgate a law through thee, and this will make them believe what thou sayest. For this reason Israel was obliged to believe his words, even though he were to abolish all that was said by the prophets before him, since his mission was verified, as he explained in the 18th chapter of the first book, and his prophetic grade was superior to all the rest, as explained in chapter 10 of this book.
John Moore.
Whether in the future there may come another prophet who will abolish the words of Moses, and whom we shall be obliged to believe, this can happen only, as we have said, in one of two ways. Either the new prophet will be proved to be greater than Moses, or his mission will be verified as that of Moses. Now the Bible says that there cannot be a prophet greater than Moses. If there be a prophet among you, I the Lord do make myself known unto him in a vision. My servant Moses is not so, he is trusted in all my house, with him do I speak mouth to mouth. It seems then that Moses' prophecy is superior to any other, and at the end of the Torah we read that there will never arise another prophet like Moses, whom God knew face to face. This is the degree which Moses asked for and was granted to him, as we read at the end of the Torah, and there hath not arisen a prophet since in Israel like unto Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. Therefore, if any prophet or anyone professing to be a prophet should come and say that he has attained a higher grade than Moses, which is impossible, and should say that we should listen to him and abolish any of the commands of Moses, not as a temporary measure merely, we will refuse to listen to him, but will tell him that he must prove his superiority to Moses and all the prophets who came after him and were his disciples by performing miracles greater and more wonderful than those performed by Moses and all the other prophets, by humiliating all those who dispute with him, as Moses did to Korah, by humiliating all those who dispute with him, as Moses did to Korah and his assembly, by triumphing over and overcoming all the wise men of his age and all his opponents, as Moses did to Pharaoh and to all the magicians and wise men of Egypt, by performing miracles in public and in the presence of all the people, as Moses did in the presence of Pharaoh and all Israel, and by maintaining the miracles a long time, as Moses caused to go before the people a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, and caused the manna to come down for 40 years without ceasing, except on the Sabbath day when it did not come down, in order to show the sanctity of the Sabbath and the truth of his words, and by fulfilling and by fulfilling many other conditions of this kind, without which he cannot make good his claim. The reason the Israelites obeyed Jeremiah...
We don't need more. Now we're going to a different topic. Otherwise,
it's not.
More. All right, fine.
Yeah, it carries on.
Fine.
Right. The reason the Israelites obeyed Jeremiah and abolished counting the months from Nisan, as we have seen, is perhaps because they based their action upon the interpretation of biblical verse, as we find in the Tosfos in the first chapter to Treatise Megillah, that the reason Ezra changed the written characters when he returned from the exile was because of his interpretation of biblical verse. Okay, so he is going on a different topic.
Okay, good.
So what you see here is
yes.
he would have to prove that he is greater than Moses. He would have to be able to show that his miracles are greater than that of Moses.
Okay.
Right? Moses was proven as a true prophet because everybody heard.
Okay.
The entire nation heard God speaking to Moses.
All right, Josh.
That did not happen with Muhammad.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, are you saying to me, because you've already retracted your position once, you're saying...
One part of the position, yes.
Yeah, no problem. But you're saying to me now, because what you were saying before was that it was inconceivable that a prophet can abrogate that which came before. Are you saying now that it's conceivable?
There is an exception to the rule.
Ha ha.
The exception to the rule is, the exception, you can laugh all you like, but the exception of the rule does not apply to your false prophet. Because the exception to the rule is where we have the miracles which are greater than the caliber of Moses.
Josh,
and,
don't be rude,
and we have to hear.
Don't be rude.
And we have to hear.
Josh, don't be rude. Don't say false prophet. We're having a good discussion.
Fine.
Don't be rude. Yeah.
Then Muhammad.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Fine.
Yeah.
Don't be rude.
Then we. Yeah. I've lost my chain of thought now. Right. The exception is right. It needs to be like Moses. And when Moses, we heard the words that God spoke to Moses.
All right, but Josh,
the entire people heard.
Josh, listen.
No one heard the words of God speaking to Muhammad.
Josh.
Yes.
In our previous encounters,
yes,
you said that a new prophet who introduces abrogation is disqualified from being a prophet by virtue of the fact that he's introduced abrogation. Now what we've just read here from Joseph Albo is in fact not only is it conceivable in the future that whatever prophet that could conceivably show that is greater than Moses could do so, but that Moses himself abrogated the law from Noah and those who came before him. So you are wrong on two accounts. Now you have to admit this before we go forward. You are wrong on two accounts. You're wrong when you said that was impossible for a prophet that comes after Moses to introduce abrogation. You are wrong. According to Talmud, That's
It's
wrong.
not the Talmud, by the way, but carry on.
Okay, well, according to this, the person that you
Sefer
consider the
Ikrim.
Sefer of Ikrim, yeah, you are wrong on that. And now, would you accept that you're wrong on that?
Sure, I should have made
Okay,
it, I should have made
great.
it more clear with exceptions. You're
No
right.
problem. I admire your sincerity here, and I admire your intellectual humility here. So you are wrong there. You are wrong again when you indicated that that had never happened in the past, because we had a long discussion in this very corner where you were trying to establish beyond, and it was implausible deniability in my opinion. You were trying to establish that no abrogation ever existed in Jewish history, basically, or before it, with any of the prophets. That was wrong as well, according to this, correct?
That is true.
So you are wrong on that account, and you're wrong on this account. So already we are seeing that you are wrong on major issues here.
What was the abrogation? What was the abrogation that has happened?
The abrogation that has happened, as he says, Joseph Albo, he says that actually Moses abrogated the teachings of the prophets that came before. We just read it out.
No,
We
but
just
you were saying, I thought you said after Moses.
No, I said both. I said that Joseph Albo stated that it was abrogated in the past, so Moses abrogated that which came before him, and that it can conceivably be abrogated in the future, so long as the prophet indicate or shows or proves that he is greater than Moses. That's exactly what we've just read. So it's conceivable on both counts. We've just read it in context. We've just had a 10-minute reading session. We just read it. No one can say we decontextualized it. So now you've changed the goalposts again, Josh, because what you've said is now we need evidence to show that the prophet was greater than Moses.
The source
But
that
actually,
you brought-
but no, I'm sorry. But actually, what we actually read, if we're being very specific, and I was clear to be specific on this matter, I was making sure that my comprehension skills were sharp, and I had to make sure that I was on point. Do you know? I read that he said, in fact, that the prophet himself cannot claim to be greater than Moses. Now, I will tell you today that the prophet actually never claimed to be greater than Moses, ever. And in fact, when there's a time where someone came to him stating that Yunus alayhi salam, Jonah, was greater than him, and the prophet corrected him and said, don't say that such and such a prophet is greater than me. Out of the humility of the prophet, out of the humility of the Prophet Muhammad. He doesn't claim that he's greater than that. He's never actually made that self-praise claim. So even on that count, it doesn't actually work. So right now, you are in a situation where you have to decide whether the Prophet Muhammad, on the virtue of his own miracles, which is what this man told us, Joseph Albo, this sage, he's telling us that on the virtue of the actual claim, he said miracles are not good enough because a magician can make a miracle. Ibn Taymiyyah made the same argument in his book An-Nubuwat, by the way. He says, but actually miracles are not good enough as a way to prove prophethood.
That's Deuteronomy 13. That's where he's getting it.
No problem.
Joseph Albo lived a long time after Muhammad.
No problem. I'm just saying. I'm not saying Muhammad said
Very
it.
good point, actually.
I'm not saying Muhammad said this. I'm saying that this point of that miracles are not good enough is something which we accept. But now we have to do some soul searching. I'm saying that on the balance of evidence, the same reasons why you would look at Moses and say, you know what, he's a prophet, whatever reasons that you think you have, we have greater reasons to show that Muhammad is a prophet. That's my challenge to you. Now, this is where the conversation is now. In the 21st century, me standing here in central London, in Speaker's Corner, with this young, strapping Jewish man. I'm talking about him, by the way. No, I'm joking. My question is, if I were to make an argument from the Prophet, the truth of the Prophet Muhammad, would you be able to, on logical grounds alone, make an argument greater than the argument I can make for Moses? Do you think you can?
You make an argument for Muhammad, and then I would have to try to make an argument greater for Moses.
I'm saying, can you make a claim that the evidence of the truthfulness of the existence of Moses? I believe in the existence of Moses, but the existence of Moses itself, that itself, is more historically tenuous than the existence of Muhammad, just by virtue of the fact that he came way before. Everything aside, in addition to that, any argument that you can make for the truthfulness of the Prophet Moses, I am challenging you and saying I can make a greater argument for Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Challenge accepted.
Okay, go ahead. What evidence if someone were atheist came to you, somebody came to you and said, look, what evidence do you have that Moses was a true prophet? What would you respond?
The claim of mass national revelation. The claim of mass national revelation goes as follows: that there is currently a people that exists today in the 21st century that unanimously believe, unanimously hold a tradition that 3,334 years ago, that's 3,334 years ago.
Sorry. I was just a bit.
I noticed.
No, I'm so sorry. Say it again.
The claim of mass national revelation.
Yes.
Which is as follows: there is currently, and this is a fact, there is currently a people who lives in this world in 2022 that, in unanimity, believes with total faith that 3,334 years ago, their ancestors heard the words of God at a mountain, and Moses was their leader at this time. Now, why is there a nation that believes such a thing? The reason we believe such a thing is because our fathers told us this fact, and their fathers told them this fact, and their fathers told them this fact, and this goes back all the way to the event itself. Well, you'll ask me, well, how do you know this was not concocted at some later date and somebody said, well, maybe and somebody came up to a group of people and said, well, many years ago, somebody, that many years ago there was an event at a mountain from your ancestors, and then some sort of earth-shattering event happened, or something less than an earth-shattering event happened, which caused every one of your ancestors to forget that this had ever happened. And here I am now, Fred, and I'm telling you this indeed took place. Right? If you want to say maybe such an event happened to concoct this fairy tale, then I would answer you. If such an event occurred to concoct it, if Fred came along, we would have his name, we would know about this event in which a people were told, your ancestors heard this so long ago, but you all forgot all about it and you know nothing about this, right? We would know all about it. We have no such event mentioned in our history. We have no such person. And this coming from a people who have names for everyone of significance in our people's history. We have names of every rabbi who made a contribution to the Talmud. We have names of every rabbi who made a contribution to the Mishnah, Brises, Tosefta, and Midrashim. We have names of numerous, right? We're talking about tens of different prophets that made contributions to the fate of the Jewish people during the First Temple period and during the Babylonian and Persian exiles.
Yes.
We have names of all of the 70 elders.
Yes.
That were the students
of
Moses
So the
and
argument,
Joshua.
just so I can get it right, your argument is effectively an argument for preservation of the faith, that the faith has been preserved, and that we know that this has been said by Moses, and that the initial primary audience, which were the children of Israel, heard it, and that the evidence that the truthfulness of Judaism is predicated on these facts.
There is one point that you missed out.
Go ahead, please.
And that is the point that they heard the words directly from God himself,
Okay.
not from a person.
Okay, excellent, no problem. That they heard it from God himself, no
Yes.
problem. Excellent. The first thing he said do you know what is really interesting is, the first thing he said was that, our forefathers said, etc. The Quran actually has a verse on this. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ آمِنُوا بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ قَالُوا بَلْ نَتَّبِعَ مَا أَلْفَيْنَا عَلَيْهِ آبَاؤُنَا وَلَوْ كَانَ آبَاؤُهُمْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ شَيْئًا وَلَا يَعْقِلُونَ. That if it said to them, believe in what Allah has revealed, they say, no, we follow what our forefathers believe in. Even if their forefathers didn't have any knowledge. Now, the point is, that first of all, at best what you're doing to me, with me right now, is showing me of a necessary condition for why Judaism is true. You're not giving me any reason to show, it's not a necessary condition, sorry, it's not a sufficient condition. Let me explain why. the preservation of a religion is a must for the religion to be true. It's not enough for the religion to be true. It's not enough. Just because some people, because really you can make this argument with false religions. You can actually make this argument with Magianism. You can make this argument with Zoroastrianism. You can actually make this argument with many other religions. That there were some people in the primary audience that actually heard this. And you can even, to be honest, you can even, sorry, you can make a better argument, and I say this with all certainty, yeah? You can make a better argument for Christianity. You can.
Make it then. Let's hear
Okay,
it.
the argument that a Christian will say,
Yes.
and by the way, I don't need to make arguments for Christianity because I'm a Muslim. I have to tell you, have to tell him, have to tell the people.
Make it.
No, but I'll make it, but I'm just giving you the point first.
Okay.
Right. The difference is, and here's what I will say, your religion, okay, Judaism,